Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article is about outer space. Once upon a time, the stars in the sky, the sun and the moon, exploring outer space and celestial bodies captured the imagination of the people. Such an exploration was viewed with pride and satisfaction. Today, it has become a new normal, and outer space no longer captures our mind space. Why? Major countries of the world are opening new avenues to the private firms, and countries that were not once active are engaging in activities related to outer space. Let's look at some of the examples. Earlier, space was the forte of the government bodies. Today, it has private organizations. It includes SpaceX, Blue Origin, Virgin Galactic, and we have countries like United Arab Emirates, which is actively participating at Mars orbiter exploration as well. Countries like China have also been starting programs like Beidou, which happens to be a satellite navigation system, and Russia has also conducted a non-destructive test of a space-based anti-satellite weapon. This was what was confirmed by United States of America as well. So what we actually witness right now is government organizations are not the only ones. It is the private organizations, and all those countries which were not active have become active in the outer space arena. What are the major advantages for all these countries for exploring the outer space, and why countries want to explore outer space is what we have to look at. The first key advantage is with respect to the space mining. What is the advantage here? Let's say, for example, man is got everything on planet blue, but man's greed is so much. In fact, Mahatma Gandhi went on to say there is everything for the man's need but not for the man's greed. All the natural resources that we have been exploited to the greatest level, and in fact the technology is so advanced that because of exploitation of all these natural resources, we have also destroyed the mother earth, we have increased the pollution levels, and we have been exploiting and abusing mother earth. And at the same time, we also require these natural resources for the future generation as well. One such advantage with space exploration is there are some calculations, there are some theories, and there are some arguments which have been put across that there are some metals and some minerals which we can explore in the outer space. One such example is, according to United States of America, asteroid named 16 Psyche has some of the heavy metals which is worth about 10,000 quadrillion dollars. This is the amount of heavy metals that which is present in the outer space only with respect to one of the asteroid. Imagine if we are able to discover in other planets or in other asteroids, so on and so forth. So the extraction of valuable minerals has led to what is called as space mining as an objective, and that is the primary reason countries are exploring at outer space. Studying outer space and exploring this region has led to development of new technologies and research. Let's say we go back to about 50 years, or in fact 60 years. We did not have the connection with respect to the GPS, or we were not even able to predict accurate weather predictions. This means the human race as a whole was suffering. But what has happened right now? In case you have to go in a local region, you don't require the expertise from the autowalas. Instead, you can use your GPS and ultimately reach your destination. We also are able to predict the rainfall. We are able to predict in case there would be a drought. All this is advancement of the technology, and that is the development of space technology. That is why countries are investing more and more into new technologies as well as research. There is also medical research happening in the space right now that could also cure diseases and also prolong the human lives, and these experiments cannot be conducted on earth. That's another reason why countries are investing so much for their investment when it comes to outer space. So fresh insights into the weather forecasting, global logistics, crop harvesting, and disaster response is why all these countries are investing in new technologies and research. There are many agencies that are now studying about the asteroids. This includes United States of America's NASA. Then we also have the European Space Agency. Why are they studying about NASA? That is because we have to know how asteroids have impacted the Earth previously, and in case there is any threat that is emanating from these asteroids, we would be able to control them if it is a possibility. The asteroid impact is about 3,300 times more energetic than a magnitude 8 of the earthquake. So we would be able to control the impact if we are able to study what this asteroid is, what is its energy all about, and that is why countries are also investing in asteroid study. Then we have the cost of reaching low Earth orbit. Initially, the cost of reaching the low Earth orbit was extremely huge. It was exorbitant, costed more, the prices were too high, but this has been reduced. It has been declined by a factor of about 20 times in less than a decade. All these statistics reveal that more and more countries exploring outer space ultimately means that the cost of exploring the outer space will start reducing eventually down the line. When we look at the space market today, according to a Bank of America report, it is about $350 billion worth industry, and it will touch about $2.7 trillion by the year 2050. It is linked to multiple industries. It can lead to creation of jobs. There'll be new investments. It will also transform lives. We will have more satellites which are minuscule, small in nature, and ultimately all this industry does, it will provide internet connectivity to the rural areas as well. So all those areas which have been seeing the digital divide, which are not able to explore the advances of industries, and with respect to digital revolution, digital technology will start getting the internet, is what are some of the advantages with respect to this particular outer space technology. But this is not all. There are some challenges and concerns with respect to the space technology. What is that we have to understand? When it comes to the present scenario, you have number of countries which are exploring the outer space, you have number of private firms which are exploring it, which means what was once a monopoly kind of a situation where only United States of America or the erstwhile Soviet Union started exploring the outer space, today is more democratized, more commercialized, and it is more crowded. Why? Because more countries are into outer space research, and we also have the private firms who are into this particular research. Since there are multiple countries today, there is democratization when it comes to the outer space. We have to look at some of the laws which are already present when it comes to the outer space. The most important law is the Outer Space Treaty of 1967. What is this Outer Space Treaty of 1967? Since it is democratized, since there are countries exploring outer space, this particular law or the treaty simply says that the outer space can only be used for the peaceful purposes, and no single country will have a sovereignty rights over it. In case we look at boundaries at the earth, we have the political boundaries, that which are drawn in India, that which is drawn in United States of America, or for any country for that matter. But when it comes to the outer space, there is no sovereignty, or a single country will not hold the outer space. So all these countries, irrespective of which one, would be able to explore the outer space, and that is for the entire humanity, is what this Outer Space Treaty of 1967 all about. So all countries can be freely use it, and they can also explore it for the scientific rationality. It also bans the stationing of the weapons of mass destruction in the outer space, prohibits any type of military activities on celestial bodies, and ultimately it clearly goes on to say that this outer space can only be used for the peaceful purposes. The original treaty was the Outer Space Treaty of the year 1967. This was further added by the Rescue Agreement, Space Liability Convention, and the Space Registration Convention. But the point to be noted is we are living in 2020. When was the law drafted? It was in 1967. Has it not become obsolete? That is because back then you had only very less number of countries which were exploring the outer space. Today you have more countries: Japan, United States of America, Russia, China, India, UAE, and many other countries which are exploring the outer space. So the law of this particular 1967 will also have to change is the first key challenge. We also have the Moon Treaty of 1979. So what is this Moon Treaty? That countries would be exploring this particular area of the moon only for the peaceful purposes, and they would not be able to disrupt the peace in this particular region. But the problem is this was not ratified by the major countries. So the major countries include Russia, we also have the United States of America, and we also have China as well. So this Moon Treaty was to be used only for the peaceful purposes, but this treaty was not signed by these major countries who have been exploring the outer space with respect to the moon. We also have one of the other important clauses in this particular treaty which clearly goes on to say that all the natural resources that are present in the moon is the heritage of the entire humankind. Harvesting all these resources is ultimately forbidden. In case they have to make sure that these resources are harvested, this will require the consent of the international regime. So only if countries decide that they want to harvest, they want to explore these important resources, they cannot do it, but instead this will require an international cooperation, an agreement from the international regime, and that is when it will be opened up for the exploration. But this is not signed by Russia, United States of America, and China. So what this Moon Treaty bans? It bans the resource harvesting by all these countries except by the permission given by the international regime. But there is another issue as well. We have what is called as resource harvesting. But what is this resource? This has not been defined under the Moon Treaty of 1979. Our initial part of the discussion was about democratization of the outer space. This means more countries are operating the outer space. This also means more countries are also launching their satellites. This also means that there are more satellites in the space than ever before. These satellites will also have a period where they get exhausted. They have to be removed, and this also means this can lead to some space debris as well. So what is the issue here? In case there is a country which has one of its satellites and which is no more required, it results in space debris, and there can be another country which might have launched the satellite, and if the space debris goes and destroys, or in fact there is some wear and tear with respect to another country's satellite, this can lead to a dispute. So a dispute between one country and another country, that is where the dispute settlement mechanism is not present, and all the laws that are present are obsolete, says the author. So what is the whole issue here? The issue is we do have the laws, but these laws are archaic in nature, and there are some countries like United States of America, China, and Russia which are not part of the Moon Treaty, and we do not have the dispute resolution system as well. So what we require is a new legislation that which is meeting the current criteria in the year 2020. Then we also have some of the other issues as well. When we initially come up with this particular law, all of these laws were basically based on the state centric approach, which means it took into approach only the state in picture. Back then it was only the state organizations, for example NASA, or you have the state organizations from Soviet Union which were exploring the outer space. So all these laws only meant that state was taken into consideration. But today what we have is the private organizations as well. As we initially discussed, we have SpaceX, we also have other companies from Amazon as well which are exploring the outer space. So why not get them also into the picture with respect to the laws? The earlier ones were only with respect to the state. Now what we have to introduce is also the private firms, and in case these private firms are not included in the law, they would not be liable for any of the actions that happens in the outer space. So that is another major flaw. The last argument is with respect to states investing in the military space systems. We have number of countries which are investing on the space assets, and in case there is another country launching a space missile and it destroys another country's missile, this can ultimately lead to destruction between two other countries. In fact, European Union's International Code of Conduct for outer space activities was also not accepted when it comes to these type of issue of military space systems. So what is that we have to understand? It is not only the technological advancement that is required in the present situation, we also have to overcome the legal, the technical and political consensus so that we have a universal international legal legislation with respect to administering the outer space. Now when it comes to India, India has also invested enormous amount of resources when it comes to ISRO as well. So what are we doing? We have also invested. That is also required for our development as well. That is also required for our own upgradation as well. We have also invested money on this moon mission. We have invested money on the Mars mission. We have also invested money when it comes to the sun's profiling as well. So what are we going to do in the near future is that India has upgraded its technological expertise. So India will have to encourage all the space countries to come together and have a legal international legislation that which will help in governing the outer space. So going forward, what we have to do is go beyond the technological milestones and address the global governance, regulate it, and also come up with control mechanisms. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about agricultural reforms initiated by the central government, changes made in some states for transforming the laws with respect to farming, and how there has to be a coordination between the central government and the state government going forward is what this article all about. What are the various initiatives taken by the central government? That is what we have to consider. We have what is called as the Essential Commodities Act. Initially, when this particular law was drafted by the central government, it looked at what is called as the price rise, and it also wanted to control the inflation with respect to agricultural commodity. Let's say in case there are people, in case there is a drought like situation and there are people who are holding on to these agricultural commodities, what we will have is consumers not able to buy the agricultural commodities. And as a result, what did the central government do? The central government came up with a legislation called as the Essential Commodities Act. According to it, they were able to regulate the dealer licensing, confiscate the stock in case it is beyond a particular benchmark, and even jail traders in case they are not complying by all these restrictions. This was a very good move initiated by the central government, and at the same time this also helped the consumers. Why? Because the price was under control. But this also had a negative tinge attached to it. Why? Because farmers were not getting the enough price for their own agricultural productivity. In order to make sure that farmers get the price, the central government recently proposed an amendment with respect to the Essential Commodities Act. According to it, there would be an amendment to regulate 6 categories of agricultural foodstuff that include cereals, pulses, edible oils, oilseeds, potato and onions. So stock limits on these commodities will not be imposed except in those times of national calamity or if it is a famine like conditions. In case there are no conditions like this, farmers would be able to extract maximum pricing for their agricultural commodity. The central government also came up with what is called as Electronic National Agricultural Market. This scheme envisaged a common market platform for all the farmers across India. They could help in agricultural commodity price discovery because of this electronic national agricultural market. What exactly happens because of this particular scheme? This will integrate all the markets across the entire state and eventually across the country through a common online market platform. Now, since the farmers are connected or integrated across the entire state, they would be able to get better pricing for their agricultural commodity. So, promoting better marketing opportunities for the farmers, and at the same time, it will also give stable prices for the customers as well. To implement this particular scheme, this required the cooperation from the state government. Why state governments? According to the 7th schedule, agriculture comes under the state list. So what they had to do was reform this particular structure and also issue a single license across the entire state, a single point of levy of the market fee, and also electronic auctioning in all the markets. This was what they were supposed to implement ideally to make sure that this National Agricultural Market becomes a successful program. But what is the issue? Several states could not or did not carry out amendments within their states, and ultimately ENAM proved to be very less effective than the desired outcome. The central government again wanted to make sure that it is actually giving very good remunerative prices for the farmers in order to reduce the farmer distress. That is when it came up with Pradhana Mantri Annadata Aay Sanrakshan Abhiyan. So what is it? Annadata here stands for the farmers, and Sanrakshan is about protecting them and also giving them enough remuneration. So this particular project was a direct procurement from the farmers, paying them for the losses incurred when market prices were lower than the announced MSP. Let's try and understand what are these bifurcations under this particular program. This is an umbrella program. It has three important sub schemes, that is price support scheme, price deficiency payment scheme, and this also has the pilot of private procurement and stockless scheme. The first sub scheme is what is called as the price support scheme. What is this price support scheme? This is provided to all those farmers for the products like pulses, oil seeds, and what we have is the copra. What happens under this sub scheme? Basically, you have the pulses, oil seeds, and copra, which stands for the dried coconut kernels, which are directly procured by the central government. So in case there are any losses suffered due to this procurement, that will be borne by the central government. The second sub scheme is called as the price deficiency payment sub scheme. What is this price deficiency payment sub scheme? As the very name denotes, it is price deficiency payment and scheme. We have what is called as the minimum support price. This minimum support price is given by the government, and when there is the selling price which is comparatively on the higher end, what the government will do is that the selling price will be subtracted from the MSP, and that amount will be directly given to the farmers. So what will the farmer do? The farmer should be registered with the government. He goes to the government and registers himself, and he has to sell his particular product at a particular mandi as defined by the government. So this scheme does not involve any physical procurement from the farmer as we initially saw in the price support system. Instead, the farmer will be given a particular amount in this particular case. So what happens? There is MSP and there is selling price. In case the selling price is comparatively on the higher level, the subtracted amount of selling price and the minimum support price will be given to the farmer, and this will be directly credited to the farmer's account. This is what is the price deficiency payment program. The third sub scheme under the PM ASHA is private procurement and stockless scheme. When you look at the second sub scheme, you had the direct interference of this government. But in this particular case, what happens? There are certain private agencies which are already registered with the government. These private agencies will be able to buy their products directly from the farmers. So what happens here? There is no government involvement directly, but this happens indirectly. How? Let me explain this for you. Let's say for example, there is the minimum support price. If the selling price of that particular agricultural commodity is less than the MSP, then this private agency will buy at that particular price. So the farmer is getting the minimum support price as prescribed by the government, but the private person or the private agency is going through a loss. So this loss undergone by the private agency will be borne by the government. How much is the amount? This will be to a maximum of 15% of the MSP of that particular crop. So kindly remember, in the second sub scheme, we have the direct involvement of the government. In the third sub scheme, we have the private agencies. Only when the amount is less than the MSP, that is when the government will pay the private agency as per the defined contract rules. And all this means that the government has taken enough steps. But we also have to focus on the concerns with respect to the PM ASHA scheme. So what are the concerns? When you look at the first price support scheme, this is only confined to the pulses, oil seeds and copra, and in the second scheme it is confined to oil seeds. In the third, once again, it is confined only to the oil seeds. all this means that there are other major products, agricultural commodities, which are kept outside this particular agricultural commodity. So only these of pulses, oilseeds and copra will be getting defined amount, and the other agricultural commodities will not be getting the prices, says the article. According to this particular analogy, it means the government wanted to save on the fiscal cost, so they have given this pricing formula only to these agricultural commodities. Now, when it comes to the actual implementation, the price support scheme was carried out in a meaningful way. When it comes to the price deficiency payment scheme, it was implemented only in selected states like the state of Madhya Pradesh. But when it comes to the private procurement and stock list scheme, this did not have any state, nor it did not have the private participation when it comes to the third sub scheme. That is the major issue. The program required budgetary support from the government, and unfortunately over a period of time the budgetary support was also decreasing, says this particular article. The government also came up with another program called as the PM Kisan program. So what is this PM Kisan program? According to it, there will be a fixed payment of about 6,000 per annum that is given to the farming households. What was an advantage was the central government initiated it, the state government started adding up to this particular amount. This also became another fruitful exercise with respect to the farming as well. So what is that we have to understand? These are the mechanisms and schemes initiated by the government, but there are some concerns with respect to all these approaches. What are these concerns? Let's say the government initially came up with what is called as the ENAM. This was basically a market-based approach. Then the government came up with what is called as the price support scheme, where there was direct intervention of the government. Then the government again came up with what is called as amendments to the Essential Commodities Act, where directly market was engaging in the agricultural activities. So there is a fluctuation that is happening. Government intervention, market intervention, government intervention, market intervention. So this means there is confusion and dilemma when it comes to the policy making. So the article here is focusing on this particular confusion and dilemma, asking the government to make sure whether you're looking at market reform or interference by the government, kindly rework and make sure that there is one particular analogy that you fix up. Why? Because in case this is not there, the investors will not be able to understand it, and they wait and watch to this particular program. One such scheme was also contract farming. A clear-cut law will have to be given by the central government and the state government is the first major proposal. Then the second major proposal is with respect to the center as well as the state coordination. Agriculture is clearly under the state list. Then we have the interstate cooperation, which comes under the central list. But the problem is central government is initiating it, state governments with opposition political parties are not initiating it. So what we have is no coordination, cooperation and confusion between the center and the state government. So what should they do? The coordination between the central government and the state government becomes very important under this particular parameter. The third is with respect to the institutional finances, and we also require what is called as insurance amount, that which has to be provided to the farmers. So what is happening of late? Institutional parameters and insurance is not being given to the farmers, and they're going to the middle workers, they're going to all the money lenders, and they are charging the farmers exorbitant interest rate, and ultimately because they are not able to pay back the loans, there are disastrous consequences of a farmer losing his life and committing suicides as well. So all this means that we also have to provide the institutional finances as well as insurance. So going forward, what we require is center engaging with the state, and we need a consistency in policy, collaborative approach and complementary reforms that are necessary for the success of agriculture is what this article all about. Now let's look into the next article. This article says bringing the internet to everyone. The COVID-19 struck all of a sudden. People who were working on the ground came to a position where they're working everything, literally everything on the online space. Healthcare, which was requiring the patient and the doctor cooperation, is now happening online. There is something called as the telemedicine, where a doctor who is in a remote position, remote place, is giving suggestions to his patient who is in some other place. Then we have the e-pharmacy. What is this? Let's say for all the drugs we had to physically go to these shops as well. We had to literally go to the pharmacist, but now all that we have to do is put up this prescription on the online platform, and drugs are also delivered to us as well. So when it comes to the healthcare, the online penetration is in fact beautiful, and this is helping all of us. Then when it comes to the education as well, what is happening of late? The education is being delivered through the online platforms of Zoom, Cisco WebEx, or in fact multiple other platforms like Geo Meet as well. Then we also have the payments. So what are these payments? We don't have to physically go to the bank, but instead we have multiple applications like PhonePe, Google Pay, and in fact Paytm as well. All this have been helping us when it comes to the digital transactions. When it comes to the food delivery, we also have Swiggy as well as Zomato. When it comes to the shopping, we have Amazon and we also have Flipkart. There are multiple other online platforms as well, and when it comes to the verification and signatures, even they are digitized in this digital era. Then we also have the option of working from home, which was not a reality a few months back as well. All this means that we are safe at home, learning, working, and increasing our capabilities thanks to the internet penetration. But the question here is, we are all living in the urban areas and we have access to the internet. But what about the marginalized community? What about the poor sections? What about the tribal community? What about the elderly community? Or what about the disabled community is what we have to look at. All of us have access to it and we are increasing and enhancing our capabilities. What about these people is the major argument under this particular article. They are not able to enjoy the fruits of the digital revolution. Healthcare and welfare are not reaching their doors. Critical services are not given to these people. And when it comes to the education, there was a recent case where one of the girl committed a suicide because she was not able to attend the online classes. All this means there is a clear cut digital divide in the urban society and in the poor rural society, and even in the poor segment amongst the urban sector. In 2016, the United General Assembly passed a non-binding resolution. What was this resolution all about? It said that internet access is a human right and every single person deserves to have internet as a tool. Then we also have in 2011 the Indian government launching the National Optical Fiber Network. This eventually went on to become what is called as the BharatNet. What was the objective of this program? Was to provide the broadband connectivity to all the rural sector and also to the people in the Gram Panchayat level as well. This BharatNet was also integrated into the Digital India initiative by the government of India. Another important program is the National Education Policy that was unveiled recently by the government. This also speaks about integration of the technology and internet as part of the education. We have also had number of landmark judgments from the Kerala High Court and also from the Supreme Court, which speaks about the significance of internet and how it is a human right, basic right for the human beings in the 21st century. In order to reduce this digital divide and to make sure that internet connectivity is provided to every single person in the nook and corner of the country, and especially in the tribal areas and also to the poor sections, the marginalized sections, and to the elderly, what we require is internet penetration and internet connectivity. For this, the government of India will have to make sure that they are adding additional optical fibers, wireless technology from the north to the south, east to the west, and technology has to be employed by use of drones as well as upgradation of the satellites. Community access points will have to be created in case individual access cannot be created in those areas. Then we also have Punjab government recently coming up and also distributing about 1.75 lakh free smartphones to the students. So what the governments in the other states will have to do is provide subsidized smartphones so that this can be used for the educational purposes. In case they are from the lower rank people, in case they are poor people who do not have access to the internet, low charges will also have to be accommodated. Therefore, the post-COVID era is all about more digitization. This digitization will also open up new economic opportunities as well. So when it is opening up economic opportunities, the poor, the marginalized will also have to see the fruits of it, and so the government will have to provide internet connectivity to every single person is what this article all about. Now let's look into the next article. This article says Amazon faces antitrust case from online sellers. What is this antitrust law? Basically, what is called as antitrust law in United States of America is called as competition laws in India. When it comes to India, what we have is the Competition Commission of India, which is looking into whether the market is working according to the principles of competition or is there a monopoly in the market. What is this article all about? There is Amazon, which is an e-marketing platform. What does it do? There are multiple retailers who showcase their products. So I as a person might showcase my product, you as a person, as a retailer, you might showcase your product. So irrespective of who is showcasing it, Amazon will have to put forward it so that consumers can buy this particular product. But what few retailers allege is, let's say you are giving a discount of about 50% for the product. For the same product, I might be giving a discount of about 20% only. In such a scenario, Amazon is showcasing only those retailers who are giving maximum discount. So what they allege is that I as a retailer will not be able to make or sell my profits, and ultimately I am under harm. So what it means is that Amazon is supporting only few retailers, but few retailers are not taken into consideration. Why? Because they are not offering discounts, and this ultimately means there is less competition, and as a result Amazon is not competitive. Amazon is violating the competition laws. Amazon is violating the antitrust laws, is what this article all about. In case this happens, what is the major issue? The consolidation of the market power in all these dominant firms means that they are in a position to dictate the terms. Many other retailers will be out of the market, and ultimately they lose their livelihood as well. In the absence of the robust anti-competitive regulation, these firms can potentially misuse the market power, enrich themselves at the cost of someone else. Someone else is going out and they are enriching themselves, and in the future more and more companies will be out, and this single person or this single identity or this single organization can become a monopoly, and ultimately consumers will not have options when it comes to the market. These are some of the issues with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about the draft health data management policy of the National Digital Health Mission. We have discussed about the National Digital Health Mission recently. A link for the same will also be provided in our description box. What has happened in the present scenario? In the present scenario, we have the National Health Authority. This is what we'll be looking into, the National Digital Health Mission. They have come up with a draft, they have uploaded on the website, and they are also looking for the feedback as well. Once this feedback is given, changes would be made, and ultimately the final copy would be released. So what is the advantage here? The advantage here is it is asking for the feedback from the people, and their feedback can also be incorporated. When it comes to the actual draft, it currently is looking at the privacy, it is looking at the consent management, data sharing, as well as the protection of all those patients who have given permission to the government of India with respect to their health issues. So the privacy, the data management and protection is what will be considered under this particular draft. One of the main objectives of this draft is adequate guidance framework of securing personal and sensitive personal data. But what we have to focus is on the National Digital Health Mission, which we have already discussed, and the link for the same will also be provided. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about the new education policy of 2020. An elaborate analysis is also for the same is already done. A description box will be providing the link for the same, so kindly look into that analysis. But rest of the things that are given in this article is not from the perspective of UPSC examination. Now let's look into some of the preliminary practice questions. The first question, Pulikali folk art form is native to which state in India? The answer to this is Kerala. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, Pulikali is from the state of Kerala. This means it is a play of the tigers. What would happen? People would paint their body as shown in the picture with the image of the tigers, and they would also don the face mask of tiger as well as leopard in few cases as well. This is usually part of the Onam celebrations in Kerala. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which of the following countries share its border with Black Sea? Russia, Turkey, Iran and Kazakhstan. The answer to this is 1 and 2 only. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, the countries bordering Black Sea includes Georgia, Russia, Ukraine, Romania, Bulgaria and Turkey. Kindly remember these countries because UPSC can ask such map questions. Now let's look into the next practice question. With reference to Data Security Council of India, which of the following statements is or incorrect? It is an attached office under the Ministry of Electronics committed to making the cyber safe, secure and trusted. The National Cyber Security Coordinator's Office in partnership with Data Security Council of India has launched Tech Saga. Which of them are incorrect? Since it is asking for the incorrect statement, the answer to this is one only. Why? Because this is not the attached office of Ministry of Electronics. Instead, it is the not-for-profit industry body on data protection in India, which is set up by NASSCOM. What is the job role? It is committed to making the cyber safe, secure and trusted by establishing best practices, standards, initiatives in cyber security and privacy. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Further, we also have to know about this particular portal called as Tech Saga. It is a platform to discover India's technological capability through a portal. The portal will list business and research entities from the IT industry, startups, academia, and individual researchers. So this is a consolidated and a comprehensive repository of India's cyber tech capabilities. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements with respect to Export Preparedness Index of the year 2020. Gujarat, Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu occupy the top 3 ranks. In the landlocked states, Telangana performed the best, followed by Rajasthan and Haryana. Which of the above statements are correct? The answer to this is one only. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So the first 3 states include Gujarat, Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu. And when it comes to the landlocked states, it is not Telangana but instead Rajasthan, followed by Telangana and Haryana. What is this Export Preparedness Index? This is released by Niti Aayog. So kindly remember this. This can be a prospective question when it comes to the preliminary examination. What is this index all about? This has a structure. It includes about 4 pillars: policy, business ecosystem, export ecosystem and export performance. It also has 11 sub pillars like export promotion, policy, institutional framework, business environment, infrastructure and transport connectivity. So this index will look into that particular state and see if all these parameters are met by that particular state. So the potentials and capacities of the state are identified, then challenges with respect to its implementation are identified and regulatory framework for the same is also suggested. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. The Brahmaputra, Irrawaddy and Mekong rivers originate in Tibet. They flow through the narrow and parallel mountain ranges in the upper reaches. One of these rivers, Brahmaputra, makes a U-turn in its course to flow into India. This U-turn is due to uplift of the folded Himalayan series and syntaxial bending of geologically young Himalayas. So the answer to this is both A and B. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Now let's look into the mains practice question. Explosive growth in space technology and advances in space exploration mandates an international space legislation addressing global governance and arms control issues. Discuss. What are the various initiatives taken by the central government to address farming distress? Have they been successful? Critically evaluate. So please write all your answers on the comment section. Peer review, come up with constructive criticism. This is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.